Hello. Can you hear me okay? Thanks for coming back. So today we have 4 past winners of the Creative Future Writers Award to talk a bit about their journeys to getting published. We have Iqbal Hussain, whose debut novel Northern Boy was published in June by Unbound First, and his short stories have won Writing Magazine's Grand Flash competition and also the Fowey Festival of Art and Literature. And his stories appear in various anthologies and websites. Iqbal was a recipient of the inaugural London Writers Award 2018. And we have Jem, who's a poet whose work focuses on the body, motherhood, food, queerness, and on triumph over trauma. Jem's first pamphlet, An Othered Mother, is out with 9 Pens Press. Their first collaborative project, Genderfucks, came out in 2022. And a new collaborative collection, Small Plates, is out now with Broken Sleep. Sorry, I should have left room for you guys to clap in between. You can clap after I've introduced all 4 of them. Natalie Linh-Bolderston has won the Eric Gregory Award and co-won the Rebecca Swift Women's Poets Prize. She's an alumni of the Ryan House Poetry Collective, London Library Emerging Writers Program, and the Vang Tang Productions Development Scheme, and Writing West Midlands Room 204. Her pamphlet, The Protection of Ghosts, was published by V Press. And finally, Tom Newlands is a recipient of the London Writers Award for Literary Fiction, and as well as the Creative Future Writers Award, the Creative Future TLC Next Up Mentorship. He was one of the 11 writers selected for New Writing Norse and New Writing Chance, and his debut novel, Only Here, Only Now, which came out this year, was a Guardian Book of the Day, and is forthcoming in the US, France, and the Netherlands. And so actually my first question was, how do you say Only Here, Only Now in French?
Well, you put me on the spot now.
Okay. So please welcome our panelists. So I thought we'd just start by, if you guys give a quick overview of your journey to getting published.
Who you want to start?
Whoever wants to start.
I guess I'll start. So I originally did a master's in creative writing at York St John University, and 2 weeks after I handed in my dissertation, I got my first job as a junior copywriter in tech, which basically meant for 8 years I didn't do any creative writing. I was writing about data centers, I was writing about all sorts of boring stuff, and basically all my words went on that. So I kind of did the odd poem here and there, but that was it. But then when COVID hit, and I couldn't go to the pub anymore, I was like, well, I need to do something. And I started writing. I joined one writer's class. I joined another writer's class. I found some amazing people to write with. And from there, we kind of all egged each other on until, yeah, my first book was a collaborative book written with one of those people in that group, John Kinsman, and another person, JP Seabright, who I'd met in a poetry reading club that was formed on Twitter. And I was basically riding their coattails. I thought they were brilliant poets, and this opportunity came up from 9 Pens Press, called the 9 series, where everybody, you got together with 2 other poets and you had to write 9 poems. Now, I was like, well this sounds like a great project. I got together with John and JP, and we wrote a series of poems about gender. But it was a really fun experiment. It was really playful. So we each wrote a poem, and then we wrote a poem based on the other person's poem, and the other and through that, wrote something absolutely incredible. Sent it off to Colin. I did cheat. Colin had published a little pamphlet with Broken Sleep books about wrestling, and I have a poem about wrestling in that collaborative work. So when I sent it to Colin, I said, hey, Colin, and by the way, there is a poem about wrestling in there. You should check it out. And I think he accepted it after about 7 hours. So yeah, that's one of my pro tips, is know what your publisher likes and just mention it in the email that you send off.
And also write about wrestling.
And write about wrestling if you want to get in with Colin, yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, I can go. Okay, so I took a creative writing module during my undergrad degree, and that was the first time I was introduced to kind of living contemporary women of colour poets, and that was the first time that I felt like myself and my preoccupations were reflected in the poetry world. So being inspired by these poets' work was really my way in to as a writer. And then after I graduated, I moved to London for work, and I went to just as many poetry events as I could, the free ones. I also joined a stanza group, which is a free peer-to-peer feedback group. And you can find your local one on the Poetry Society website, if that's useful to anyone. And then what else did I do? Oh yeah, and then after a while of getting this free peer feedback, which was really great, I got the confidence to start submitting to journals that I thought might suit my work, and also prizes like the Creative Future Writers Award. And also one of the early places that I submitted to was Young Poets Network, which caters to 18 to 25-year-olds and sets a lot of really great challenges and puts out a lot of resources and prompts. So I'd really recommend that. And then I placed in the Creative Future competition, and that gave me the confidence to submit to V-Press with my debut pamphlet, and they accepted it. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to get reviewed off the back of that.
Thanks.
Yeah, well, I started writing during the pandemic. I was given 3 months furlough from my job. I had a really shit job, and I was desperate to get out of it. And I thought I would just try and do something different, do something creative. So I didn't come from a writing background. I didn't go to university. And so sitting down at a laptop was a very alien thing to me, and writing in that way. And it was I had about 1,000 or 2,000 words only when I entered them into the Creative Future competition. And I placed 4th in that competition, which was beyond my wildest dreams at that point. And that really got the ball rolling, and I kept writing. I kept entering at various places, and eventually I gained a few other places on courses by Spread the Word, New Writing North, Curtis Brown, and all that time, I was building the manuscript. I was writing, and eventually I was spotted by my agent, and the rest is history. And my novel came out this summer.
Hi all. So my background is as a journalist. So I worked as a journalist for about 8-9 years. And then probably about 2018, I thought, let's try and write something different. So let's try and write fiction. So I'd always had an idea about writing something a bit semi-autobiographical about a young boy growing up in the north of England in 1981, a bit like Billy Elliot, a bit like Bend It Like Beckham, East is East, those kind of stories. You write about what you know, I think, for your first book, and then entered the competition at Creative Futures, and I got placed on that in the gold category. That gave me a huge amount of confidence, as you guys have said. An amazing competition, by the way, that's free to enter every year. So if you get a chance, you've got nothing to lose, literally. And then I started on the London Writers' Award in 2019, I think that was. Again, it was free to enter, and they picked 30 writers at the time who were writing fiction, poetry, non-fiction. And I think just by doing those things, those kind of freely available courses and schemes, if you come from a working class background, you're not used to going on these very expensive courses that you can do for Curtis Brown, who are absolutely fine. Faber is another one. They know what they're doing, but my goodness, they're not cheap. You could be taking an MA in creative writing, but you really don't need to. I think as long as you've got something to say and you want to write it in whatever form you feel comfortable in, you just go ahead and do it. And there's opportunities out there if you want them that do not cost the earth. So my book, Northern Boy, came out in June of this year, and it's been a real delight seeing it on bookshelves. And these guys, Matt and the whole team, have been so supportive. So honestly, if a boy from Blackburn, Lancashire can see his book in Waterstones, so can you. So just believe in yourself and your words.
Thanks. So the second question was, I don't know whether we should do the positive or the negative one first. Let's do the bad one. What were the biggest barriers for you as a writer and getting to the point where you are now?
I think time and money for me, and I think those are two of the things which we don't speak about a lot. You know, any creative project, you know, you can only sit at a laptop chipping away at it for so long. You do need to put distance between yourself and what you're doing, and you do need to have that luxury of daydreaming, of walking, of thinking things over. And of course, so many people don't have that. You know, they've got jobs, they've got caring responsibilities. Myself, I'm autistic, I'm disabled. It was very difficult for me to hold down a job and then tackle a creative project at the weekend or in the evenings. And so I was really lucky that I did what I did when furlough came along. That gave me the time and the space to really sit down and think about something on quite a big scale.
I would say just not knowing where things are. So, for example, when I first started, I didn't really know where to look to read good free poetry. And actually there is a lot online, but you need people to signpost you to that. And also not knowing where the free feedback is, because like the others have said, so many courses are so expensive. But yeah, someone had to tell me about the Stanza group that is, you know, accessible all over the country. And yeah, I think that like that's another barrier, is not being able to get feedback. And yeah, one way around that is development programs, but you do have to know about them and be able to find them. And I think just maybe for me, the third barrier is maybe lack of confidence, because sometimes I think it can feel like the kind of people who get published are maybe like very much in the world already, and you might feel a bit like an outsider. But yeah, I think that having met so many people who came at it from different angles, it really showed me that there's just not just one way to do things. So you don't necessarily have to go and get that PhD to get noticed or whatever. There's other ways.
I would say for me, the real barriers seem to be all the gatekeepers that you come across. So first of all, if you write a book, that's great, but it's the first stage of your journey. Then you've got to normally find an agent who will take you on, who will then take your book and edit it with you, and then they'll go to all the publishers and try and sell your book. But finding the agent can be really difficult because they get literally hundreds of entries every week. So you do need this amazing self-belief that your words matter. And then once you get the agent, you think, it's all fine and dandy, I'm going to be published, but no, because then it has to go out to the publishers, and then they're also gatekeepers because they have their personal tastes. They have ideas as to what they think is going to sell, what they think the average reader is going to want to read. And if your book is set in a world like a Pakistani household in 1981 in a former mill town, that doesn't, for them, signal something that they can sell, even though readers like books like East is East and Bend It Like Beckham and all the other things. So, but it's that incredible belief in yourself that you mustn't ever let go of, because you're going to get knockbacks until somebody picks you up, somebody signs you up, somebody snaps up your book, you win a competition or whatever it is. It was all those different gatekeepers over which you have very little control. All you can control is your writing and just making yourself write the best that you can.
I think for me, the biggest barrier for writing was twofold. It's poverty. If you work a really hard job, if you're on your feet all day, if whatever it is that you're doing, you don't have any spoons left when you get home, then how are you supposed to write? That's actually why I do poetry, because poetry is something that you can do on the bus, on the back of an envelope, or whatever. It's accessible. You don't need, it's one of the arts that you don't need paint and clay for. You can just find a pen and do it on the back of a final demand notice if you need to. And I found, for me, so I was signed off sick for, like 9 years with mental health challenges. And then that was another barrier because I couldn't, I just sat in the pub all day, basically. This is why COVID was great. So those were two huge challenges. And I think the other big challenge is seeing people like yourself actually succeeding. Because I think I always thought poetry was snobby, and hoity-toity and middle class at worst, and therefore wasn't for me, you know. And I still think that perception of that is there, even when you're studying at school and you've got your AQA anthology of poetry, and there are loads of different voices. But for me, being taught that by a white middle-class teacher and being told, oh no, they mean this thing, it feels really inaccessible at school, and you almost have to unlearn what it is, what poetry is, to go, oh no, I can be that, I can be a poet, I am. I'm going to sit here right now and go, I am a poet. What a crazy thing to say. But yeah, I'm really proud of the fact that I can.
So, what was the greatest help in getting published and establishing yourself as a writer?
For me, it was definitely having organizations like Creative Future, Spread the Word, believing in me, because by winning a competition, say, or you get placed, or you get called in for an interview, these are all really good affirmations that other people believe in your words. Because you can ask your friends, you can ask your boyfriend, your girlfriend, can they read your story or your poem or your book? And they will usually just say it's brilliant, even if it's not. But an organization that deals with writing has nothing to gain by saying, this is great, you've won a prize or you've won a place on the course. So for me, it was always that affirmation from an external organization that I respected, that I believed mattered. That's what really gave me confidence. And I thought, okay, I can do this. So I used to write articles. Now I can write fiction. I can switch. And just seeing more and more people from my background who were then publishing books. As you say, it's really difficult. If you don't see people who look like you reflected in the books that you read, or the TV that you watch, or the poetry that you analyze, it's very hard to see where you fit in. And the mainstream publishing industry still has, I believe, difficulty sometimes in seeing that other voices are just as valid. And as much as they want to hear new voices and new takes on things, often you feel that they just want more of the same. So it's really important that we fight against that and just say, no, there is a market for a book about something that seems very outsidery, but really isn't, because the experiences within the book, I think, are quite universal. So yeah, just having external belief for me.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree totally with what Iqbal says, and I was on many of the same courses that he was. You know, for underrepresented voices, for people on a low income, for disabled writers such as myself. And I think if you want to get a project off the ground, if you want to write a book, if you want to publish something, momentum is very important. And it's very difficult to generate momentum if you don't have connections and if you don't see people like yourself out there writing. And I think, you know, organizations like Creative Future, like Spread the Word, Curtis Brown, I was put in touch with so many other people who were at a similar stage to me and from a similar background to me, and they were brilliant writers. And it gave me something to aspire to, and it gave me support. And all of a sudden I found that I had that momentum. I wasn't sitting alone with my laptop anymore. I had other people on my side. And it's amazing to see how something can build and generate from nothing.
I think for me, social media, like, genuinely was astounding. And, you know, curse Elon Musk for taking Twitter away from us. I think he's done the world a massive disservice, because it was on Twitter that I met writers that looked like me, that we built out our poetry reading club. I mean, it's fine. We've got one on WhatsApp now, and I've got Instagram now, but it's not the same, that immediacy that Twitter was, where you could go, I'm thinking about this thing. Has anyone thought about this thing before? And then suddenly you'd have a bunch of people going, oh, yeah, you should check out this, or oh, I do that. And you could have genuine conversations without even having to win anything. It was just there, accessible for everybody. And I don't know how we get that back. I think there must be a way. I hope we can. Because genuinely, I don't think without social media, I would be where I am today.
I just want to ask, because it's kind of been coming up a little bit. So where do you each get your kind of feedback on your work in the past and maybe at the moment?
I was going to say that my greatest help in getting published and established was actually having a feedback group and being on development programs. So the feedback group was the stanza group that I joined when I was in London via the Poetry Society. Yeah, and someone just told me about that and I was able to join. And the other feedback from development programs was just from applying to them. So that was, for me, that was Roundhouse Collective, which is in London, London Library Emerging Writers Programme, which is also London-based, and Room 204, which is sort of West Midlands-based. And yeah, from, I think, meeting people through those things gave me kind of offshoot feedback groups, so that's where I get that. But I think the reason that they help isn't just because of the feedback, it's because you have a bunch of people who understand you, are invested in you, and make you feel seen. And also they signpost you to places where they know they might like your work, and prizes where you might have a good shot, and events that might inspire you. And also you have someone to go to those events with, if you want to go.
I just found a bunch of nerds locally. I'm in a group called Brave Words, which is my friend Chris's theatre group that he does for kids. But as an offshoot of that in COVID, it became a Zoom writing and editing session. I still, every Thursday now, get together with Chris Campbell, who I wrote Small Plates with, and we'd sit and write together on Zoom. We've both got ADHD, and we'll both bring a poem, discuss that poem, what we like, what we don't like, go off, write for 30 minutes, come back, talk about what we've done, and having a collaborator, whether that was JP and John, or later on Erica or Chris, I have found that one-on-one is what has really worked for me, to have somebody who believes in me. And yeah, now I've still got a group of people I can say, oh, I've written this poem, could you like maybe feedback on it for me? And I've got that on various social media sites, but just that personal connection I found is really helpful with a poet that I respect.
Yeah. X and Twitter in the past, as it used to be, absolutely agree. I think it's such a shame it's gone, because most of my writing contacts initially all came from X. And it's really brilliant when you come across people who understand you, who get the writing process, who know what you're experiencing, who are not just pandering to your ego by saying it's great when it's not. So they'll say, have you thought about why are you doing this? What's that character doing? And then also courses like Curtis Brown. So having said they are hideously expensive, they are, but some of their courses are slightly more manageable. They're like £80, £100. Still not cheap, but they do offer scholarships occasionally, competitions again on X and Twitter, and if you win them, you get a place on the course. Spread the word. London Writers' Award, so they had feedback groups that we're in touch with still. I was part of an organisation called Megaphone Writes, which is for children's books, and we're all still in touch. We all meet up and have lunch once a quarter. We all send things through on the WhatsApp group we have. We all moan about things. We all rejoice in each other's successes. That kind of, as writers, as you said, Tom, often we sit in a room, not quite a lonely garret, but it's not far behind. But we don't meet people in a normal situation because it's quite an internalized thing we do. So we do need these writing groups who support us, who understand us, who we can just fire off, even if all you're doing is just saying how you're stuck on chapter 5 and can anyone think of a way to get around a particular problem. We all need that human contact, and often partners and friends just can't do it. How about you, Tom?
London Writers' Award was absolutely massive for me, and I did that in lockdown, which was a lifesaver really, to have a group of people around me then on Zoom and on WhatsApp or whatever that you can, as Iqbal says, you can feedback about anything you need to, and Spread the Word have started it again this year, and I think the closing date is next week. So there's still time to enter that, and it's a really, really valuable thing. It's a 6-month intensive course. It teaches you everything you need to know about the publishing industry in depth. And I developed my manuscript on that course. And I wouldn't be sitting here, I wouldn't have a published book without that course.
I want to ask a tough question, because it's something that, in my work of supporting all these writers, I see kind of again and again and again, and it's hard to figure out how best to support it, which is, you know, as a writer, you basically have two states, right? Like quantum state. One is, I am. So the question is, your confidence is never going to be 24/7, because if it was, you would be, well, you'd be like one of those sociopaths that runs a big company. But what do you guys do to try to keep your confidence going, whether you're up or down? I know it's a tough one, but it's just something I think about all the time.
I don't think there's anything you can do, to be honest. And somebody asked me at an event previous, you know, like, what does it feel like when your book's published? And it's, you know, my book's had quite good reviews. It's being translated. It's coming out in America. All the things that I dreamed of but never really believed would happen. And it doesn't automatically make you a writer. It doesn't shift your own perception of what you're doing. When you sit down, you still have the same doubts. You might be a little bit better at it. You might be a little bit quicker. But those doubts remain, certainly for me. And I have ADHD as well, which makes it doubly difficult just to even get myself in front of a laptop. Never mind write a book over 4 years. It was a very difficult process. And so it's really hard, but you learn a lot about yourself at the same time. You might not be able to always kind of keep yourself buoyed up with your own importance or your own brilliance. But certainly going through the effort of sitting down every day or every week or whatever it is you can manage and returning to a project over and over again and putting yourself through that teaches you a tremendous amount about the way your brain works, about your own creativity, about finding a way to finish something and to make it as good as you possibly can.
You do need that resilience, that sense of persistence, doggedness. So when Northern Boy was being written, and it then got picked up by the agent, and then the agent finally was sending it out to these all the publishers, we had real issues in it being selected. And this is quite a common experience, unfortunately, that once you have the agent, you assume that your book's going to be published, and really it may not be, because there are so many hurdles that you have to go through, and the finance department of each publishing house has got to make sure that they think they can make money off your book. So when Northern Boy, that I'd spent 3 or 4 good years ploughing all my energies into, failed to get picked up, I genuinely thought, oh, well, that's it. I'm going to put the book away. I'm never going to write again, blah, blah, blah. Because you feel deflated, even though the agent has seen value in your writing, the fact that the publishers don't see value in your writing. And ultimately, most of us writers, if we're being honest, we want to be published. We're not writing for ourselves, as interesting as writing for yourself is. So I nearly shelved it, and then I spotted a competition that came from Unbound, who do the crowdsourcing books. And they've started a new competition where they will agree to publish 2 books every year from writers from underrepresented backgrounds. I sent it off on the off chance, not thinking anything more of it. It was free to enter, so why not? And then it got long-listed and short-listed and then selected at the end. And that's how Northern Boy has now come into being. So sometimes, I think just by keeping your options open and just saying yes to nearly everything, that's my mantra. Say yes, especially if it's free. Things come off it, and somebody will recognize you from a little festival or something, or they'll have met you talking somewhere, and they'll recommend you to a friend of theirs who knows somebody else. Often it's about, unfortunately, who you know or who people you know, who they know. Much of it is luck, sadly. So you can be the best writer in the world, but if the right agent and the right editor hasn't come across your book and felt that urge to get it out there, that can be tough. But all you need is one yes. You need one yes from the agent. You need one editor who says yes, and that's all you need. Or you need one competition that you win, or something that you place and that other people see you in, and then they approach you separately. So yeah, as tough as it is, and it can be tough, and you can really, then you'll see tweets and Instagram messages from friends of yours, or writer friends, and they've just been selected, and they've got a deal, or they've got a 2-book deal, or something's happened to them that's a really lovely piece of news, and of course you're happy for them, but that does compound. And I'm no angel, but that's tough. That you've got to be shown to be still supporting them, and all you want is you want to hit them, really. But that's not their fault. But yeah, just never give up faith in. It's a key message. Never give up faith in yourself, because if the book's meant to be out there, if the poetry is meant to be out there, or your non-fiction essays meant to be out there, it'll find a home, but it might not be the obvious routes for you to get there.
I think for me, I've always thought of writing as a work. Like, I've never found it something that's particularly relaxing. And to be honest, it's since I started writing seriously, it's never been a hobby. So yeah, when I have confidence crisis, that can be really difficult because that's part of my practice that is kind of ailing. So I had some difficulties writing this year with confidence and things like that. But I have been doing other things, so I've been sort of concentrating on my work as a facilitator of workshops and that kind of thing, and community work. And it's just reminding myself that that is also the work of being a writer. That is just as important, reaching out to people, connecting with people. Yeah, that's something that really has its own value. So yeah, I think that's how I've kept my confidence going, is that I'm still doing something that is part of my practice as a writer, even if the writing isn't coming so easily right now.
I mean, I feel like a bit of a cheat, to be honest, because I'm a poet, right? So if I'm like, oh, this isn't very good, it's fine, it's not taking me very long, and I can chuck it on I've got a folder called bits, and all of my bits that aren't very good go in there, and I'll use them later, maybe. But the way I keep my confidence going is just write something that's meaningful and share it with people. And if you make somebody cry when you've written a poem, you're like, yes, it's deeply satisfying. It is. Or likewise, if you write something funny and it makes somebody laugh, and they laugh at the bit they're supposed to laugh at, not the bit they're not supposed to laugh at, then that's it. That's all I need, I think, as a writer. Just, what are we doing when we're writing? Are we getting words out, or are we trying to move somebody? We're trying to make them feel something. And if I can make somebody feel something using just a pencil, that's that's what we're here for, and therefore I can take my confidence and just do that. I wrote a poem, like, I found out 2 weeks ago one of my oldest friends had died, and 25 minutes later I wrote a poem, boom, and I shared it on Instagram, and 2 people who didn't even know the guy messaged me to say, oh my God, like, that's amazing, that really moved me. And I was like, this is great, give it a quick edit, send it off, and it got accepted for publication this morning. Wow. Because, yeah, thank you. But it's cheating being a poet, because you can do that. It's not like you've got to sit there for 6 months tearing your hair out, like, into the night. You just go, oh, this thing happened, I feel moved. Here you go, there. And yeah, so be a poet, that's how you do it.
Yeah. That's Jem's advice. I think one thing that is a bit underrated, and kind of get asked a lot, oh, how do I do this, and how do I negotiate with an agent, and how do I get an agent, and how do I get published, and all this. But I feel that sometimes people don't really see the forest for the trees, which is, you got to write something, and that's the main thing. A lot of the other stuff is kind of a sideshow and can be a bit of a distraction. Like, don't think about, where am I going to place my book? Oh, is it marketable? All that kind of stuff. Like, write something good, and make sure it's the best thing you could possibly write. And I feel that sometimes we kind of lose sight of that a little bit.
You've not only got to write it, you've got to finish it, which is the really, really difficult
finishing it. Yeah, finishing it. I think that's also highly underrated, particularly with a whole book, which is people say, either before they finish the book, or, oh, how do I get it published? Well, finish the book first.
Yeah.
And then once it's finished, immediately jumping into all this anxiety about getting it published without really congratulating yourself and feeling that sense of achievement. You finished a book. Very few people do that. And at the end of the day, if it gets published or not, if it gets published in the Netherlands, it doesn't. It gets translated into Swedish, whatever. Like, you wrote a book, and that's really, really, really important. And I think it sometimes can be underrated. So if you had to give one piece of advice to somebody who was just starting out as a writer, what would it be?
Find your nerds. Like,
Find your nerds.
find your nerds. Like, you will have, like, everybody has a different style of writing, whether you're doing poetry or literary fiction or science fiction, but there will be nerds out there who get you, who get what it is that you're doing. And if you can find those people, then you will always be buoyed by those people. You know, I can't remember the saying. I haven't slept for a year. I've got a baby. But there's the saying about, you know...
About nerds?
About ships, about everybody's ships rising at the same time. Does anyone know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's that one about the many ships lift the tide lifts the ships. Something like that.
Something like that. Anyway, that saying that I can definitely remember.
You're
it's
the
that.
poet.
Therefore, I don't use cliche. How dare you? That's why I can't remember it, and that's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. But yeah, find those people who lift you up. And likewise, who will tell you, yeah, that is absolutely shit, mate, throw it away. But if you can find those people that you resonate with, for me as a neurodivergent writer, it's neurodivergent writers who can just give you that honest feedback. But so the poem that I used, that I won the Creative Future Award for, had a terrible title. And I took it to my editing class, I took it to my nerds, and they suggested a really long title. So the poem is Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs according to a 16-year-old girl laying on a single bed staring at the ceiling in a homeless hostel. And that was their idea. And I think that's why it won, because it's preposterous, but it's really like, it makes you notice. So yeah, find your nerds that will tell you, give you that good piece of advice.
I think from a poetry perspective, I'd say keep reading contemporary poetry until you find the writers who speak to you and make you want to write. Because I think that you can't really be a writer without being a reader. And I think that doesn't have to be an expensive thing, because I think some of the most beautiful and innovative journals are online and free. So I'm just going to do like a very short recommendations list, if that's all right. So my favourite are The Margins, Young Poets Network, Wildness, The Offing, Frontier Poetry, Amber Flora, The Willow Herb Review, and Harana. So yeah, they're my favourite places.
I think finish it. Yeah, definitely. It's underrated, finishing it. Whatever it takes to drag you back to the project, just whether it's cake, whether it's other rewards, whatever you need to do, make yourself sit down and finish it, because that's when the magic happens. You know, you don't know what's going to happen. And when I look back, you know, I gave up and I walked away from my book so many times, and I'm so glad that I went back to it, because it's changed my life completely. I'm a full-time writer now, which was way beyond anything that I ever expected. And so when you finish a project, it then has the ability to take on a life of its own, which is something I never considered. But my book is out there now, like doing its thing, and I'm at home with my feet up, which is quite good.
I've got a few short things. I would say, as you said, be a reader as well as a writer. So particularly read in your genre. So if you're writing a thriller, make sure you read thrillers. If you're writing a children's book, make sure that you're reading children's books. So I started writing a children's book earlier this year, and I thought that the books I used to read as a child, the Enid Blytons, the E. Nesbits, were going to cut the mustard. They don't. You've got to read contemporary fiction in your field and really get into that world. The other piece of advice I would say is, when you're writing, whether it's a short story or flash fiction or a book, come in late into your story and leave early. So don't spend 3 chapters writing about how beautiful your setting is. And actually any paragraph or 2 that you write that you're really proud of, generally I would say cut it, because it's not going to be doing any favors to the story or the plot. So don't be scared to go over your words and edit. And the third piece of advice I'd say is be really open to feedback. So I'm just doing a course in the evenings on musical theatre, so I write the music, and I'm working with various people who are writing lyrics. And honestly, every lyricist who has said, I'm not precious about my words, and they really have been. I mentioned one word has got to change, and the fit they've thrown. You can't afford to be a writer if you can't get feedback, because, especially feedback from people in the industry or from other writers, because they have a valid opinion, and they're not saying that what you've written is rubbish, but it might be expressed in a better way. So don't be too proud of your own words. Accept that every draft is just that's a draft, and that by taking on feedback, it'll get better. On the same side of that coin, don't ask for too much feedback. So don't have 10 people feeding back on your story, because they will all think differently, and then it becomes really hard for you to choose which advice that you're going to go forward with. So yeah, just be open, read widely, and when you're writing your stuff, come in late, leave early.
I think on that, knowing when to ignore feedback is really important. Yeah. Joelle Taylor fed back to me on my poem for the anthology. I was like, I think you can cut this. And I just went, no, you're not wrong. You're not right. Like, and I didn't. And I'm really glad I didn't, because the things that I was saying there were really important. So like, it was genuinely scary to do that, but I did it, and I'm glad that I did.
One thing, I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll take questions from the audience. I think there's a sense of, or I just wanted to ask you, do you have a particular writing routine, or is it kind of as and when? Because you always hear this thing of, you know, by these overachievers, like, oh, I get up every morning at 6 a.m., and then I eat steel-cut oats, and then I jog 10 miles, and then I sit down and I write exactly 1,000 words, and then I go to work or whatever and look after my kids, and oh my gosh, who are these people? But they're kind of, you know, I think there's a sense of that. I'm just wondering, do you have a routine or not? And if so, what is it?
When I wrote my book, I did have a routine, and I was getting up at 6 a.m. and steel cut.
I hate you so much.
You know, somebody asked me, like, how did you apply yourself? How did you write your first draft? And well, I was in a very bad job. I was in a really bad situation, and I thought, well, I've got a 3-month furlough period here, and so I got my head down and I did it. But it's very difficult now. I look back at myself then, and I don't know how I did it, and I certainly don't do that now. And I think it's really important to take on advice. Of course it is, and I think it's important to, you know, read books about creative writing and things, but so much of the advice we get is ableist, and I think it's really important to do what you can manage. I think it's really important to think about your own life and how you can fit writing into it. And, you know, I was 40 before I started writing my book, and one of the big reasons I didn't start writing is because what I read in these books and on these websites didn't match my life at all. And, you know, we have an idea about writing as being, you know, you've got your leather-bound moleskin and your fountain pen and your cup of coffee and your steel-cut oats, of course. But I think it's really important to kind of de-glamorize it and just do whatever works for you.
I totally agree with that idea of doing what you can manage. I really love that way of putting it. Yeah, I really chime with that because I also work full-time and I freelance as well, so by the evening I'm really tired. So I just know it's not going to really happen. So my writing time is mainly kind of weekends or days off or whatever. But it's also being flexible with yourself with how you do that. So sometimes I just cannot bear to look at a screen anymore after working, and that's okay. I can just, you know, scribble in my notebooks, have a few fragments here and there, open the notes app on my phone or whatever. And sometimes I am ready to get my laptop out and have like a longer session. And I think it's just giving yourself the space to do that, and flexibility to just do what is best for you at that moment.
For me, it's that body doubling thing that I talked about, where I'm on Zoom. I'm not necessarily, you know, cameras are off, microphones are off, but I know there's somebody there at the end who is actually writing at the same time as me. I find that incredibly helpful. But write when you feel the urge. If you lose your routine, because I think, like, as somebody with ADHD, I'm sure, like, the thing about a routine is you can have it for a time, and then the minute you stop for one day, boom, it is gone forever. And you have to forgive yourself for that. I think it's really important. I think everybody's kind of said the same thing. Like, it's okay to put that down. I think the secret is getting back up. So I've barely written anything this year. As I said, I've got a 1-year-old who still has never slept. No, she slept through the night once, and that's it. So I've written as and when I felt the urge. I've now got a project that is brewing, and I've been thinking about it on and off for 5 years, and I feel ready. But the way I think about my writing is sometimes it needs to percolate. You have to put the words in, you have to do the reading to get the words out. But even that, I've barely read any poetry in the last year. I've just read science fiction because it's brilliant, and I don't want to have to think about anything serious. I just want to think about spaceships. It's fine. So yeah, forgive yourself when you drop that routine, but just remember those things that do get you to write, and when you feel ready, do them.
Yeah, I think that's also something that's very underrated is the thinking time. You know, oh, what did you do today? Well, you know, I went shopping and I did the laundry and this and that and the other thing, but you're still thinking about the work. And I think that's highly underrated. Just sitting in front of at the desk that's not where it doesn't all happen there.
It's very difficult to judge what you're doing unless you can get distance from your work. And there's no easy way of doing that. You just have to put it away and go and do something else.
Yeah, that's true too.
I agree with all your points. So I would say, don't get drawn in by people on Twitter who say, yay, 5,000 words done today. You don't know what 5,000 words they've written, whether they're telling the truth. It could be 5,000 rubbish words.
It's a shopping list.
It's a shopping list, and it's plain showing off. Don't be drawn in. I would say that what works for me is to try and write little and often, just so you stay in that world of the writer's world, because I find it quite difficult. If you have normal jobs, which most of us do, 4 or 5 days a week you're doing normal job, and maybe at the weekend you sit down and you write your words. It can be really hard to get back into that world if you're only finding the time at the weekend. Even if you write, 100 words, 200 words every other day, every 3 days, every 4 days, just to keep your hand in. And the thing that I tend to do is, so I'll work at the weekend on my book, on my stories, and I'll treat it like a normal work day. So I'll sit down at 9 and I'll finish at 5 and I'll have breaks. That's not always a productive time, so I'll be wasting time on the internet and going and making a cup of tea, having a fifth biscuit, playing with a dog, all these things that are time-wasting things that we all do. That's fine, don't beat yourself up about it. But I find quite useful is to finish a day's writing in the middle of a scene or a paragraph or a section or a chapter where you're really into it, so that you can pick it up easily the next day. You can just literally go, oh, exciting point, and keep going. Somebody else, of course, might think, oh, it's too exciting, we're going to keep going until the words have left me. I find that harder. I'd rather come back knowing there's an exciting point that I'm going to just start off with, and that's always worked with me. But yeah, don't get drawn in by all these showy-offy people who are saying 5,000 words, yay. No.
Thanks. So let's take, we have about 10 minutes for questions. I can't actually see you that well. Yes, please, in the green. So the question is whether or not you should get a mentor even at the early stages of your work.
Well, personally, I would say push on and finish it. And I think finishing it might give you more clarity about what it is you're doing. Of course, if you have the money and you want to do it, a mentor could help as well. But I found so often in the writing of my book that the best way to generate ideas and to generate clarity about what I was doing was just to keep writing it. And it was during that writing that I was working out, you know, a lot of inspiration came to me when I was, out walking or lying in the bath or whatever, but the actual act of writing and letting it kind of guide me a little bit, helped me develop so many different parts of my book that wouldn't be there, without that. And so going through the process of finishing it might give you more clarity than you expect. And certainly when you've done that, you can then put it away and come back to it, and you might have a completely fresh perspective.
I've just been inquiring about mentors, and you're not wrong. I think I found somebody that has agreed to be my mentor, and she's amazing, but it's £180 an hour. I am if anybody needs a mentor, I can come into you for that, don't worry. But I think you don't need to pay somebody all of that money. You will have local writing groups. They will be in your library. They will be, I don't know where you find them. For me, where I live, every time I walk past my local library, there's a sign up, Farsley Writers. I was like, I won't really go to that because I don't really like leaving the house. But different strokes for different folks. And yeah, find the ones that are online. Do it that way. Don't fork out huge amounts of money, because then you have that expectation as well that you've got to get something back. And I don't think that's fair to yourself if it doesn't work out. Like, be kind to yourself. Find some people that you want to share the work with, and then also think about writing exercises. If you're working on a really, really big project, if you just always sit down to do that project, you can end up feeling stuck. And if you feel stuck, then you're like, I don't actually, am I even a writer? Can I do this? Go off and do something else. Go do a little short story course. Go write a poem, whatever it is, just to remind yourself that you like it and that it's fun and that you are good at it. And then you can come back to that work and maybe have learned something from doing a short story course that brings a new perspective to what it is that you're doing to get you unstuck.
Yes, in the hoodie, please. Yes, please, with the microphone, I can't hear.
Cool.
Oh, that's you, Francis.
Oh, yeah. Hey. So you kind of alluded to it a bit when you were talking about feedback and editing. My question was, when going from your own writing to publishing or just getting it accepted by a mag or something like that, was there anything within the actual writing itself, so not in terms of your practice, within the actual writing, where whether it was stylistically or thematically, you had to make compromises or sacrifice something within that to get it that far? Or have you, for the most part, been able to stay true to the intentions you had at the beginning?
Oh, that's a good question. So in the process of going from finishing the piece and then having it published, whether in a book or a magazine, did you have to make compromises in the editorial process?
Oh, I can take this one if that's all right.
Yeah, you have some good ones about this.
Yeah, this is honestly. So Northern Boy first draft that I wrote were like 150,000 words, which is an enormous amount of words for a book that's not a fantasy or historical book. So I always knew it was bloated and it's going to have to be edited. So then chopped it down to 90,000 words. Then my agent said, oh, actually, this book just stays in the world of a 10-year-old boy. We want to find out what happens to him. And I knew he was right because I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. I thought, oh, no. Because then you know it's going to involve a lot of work. So then I had to take out 30,000 words from a 90,000 thing that I'd already edited severely, and then write 30,000 new words if the character was a 30-year-old boy, a man, and a 50-year-old man. Things that I really hadn't wanted to do. That in the back of my mind, I kind of knew that I maybe might have to do at some point, but hoping that no one else would see this. No, agents and editors can sniff out an underwritten story way faster. No, honestly, there's no escape. So then that's where some level of feedback you have to take on board, because especially if you hear that message a few times, so he said it, and an external editor also said the same thing, but what happens to this boy at the age of whatever? And at that level of rewrite, that's quite considerable, and you would probably only do that if somebody had already taken the book on in some form, because when you're doing that amount of rewriting, you want to know that it's going to be published at that end. And it was going to be, of course, at that point. So, yeah, honestly, some things, some battles are not worth fighting because you know in your heart that they are correct. Other battles are smaller battles, so they might say something like, oh, you've got 3 sisters, do we need all 3 of them for the story? And actually, you might do because all their characters are slightly different. Or you might feel it's a hill not worth dying on. Some things, it's a completely subjective thing often, and what you think is important, they might not think is important. So you have to argue your case for it. And sometimes you have to be really mindful of things like language and how that changes. So my book is set in 1980, and I was using like insults in the playground that we all used at the time. These are not acceptable now, even though you're claiming it's still in 1980, because we readers were not in 1980. Sometimes you've got to listen to people who know more about the industry than what you do, because they will say, but if you continue with that language in this scene, it'll exclude certain readers. So that I found fascinating, because that wasn't something that I'd even thought about. I just thought a book set in the period of 1980, you would write how you used to talk in the 1980s, but no, it's still edited carefully, it's curated. But yeah.
I think it pays to have a very loose grip on your writing. I think if you start becoming very precious about the things you're writing about, you're going to run into trouble, because when an editor gets hold of your work, they will want to change it. I mean, my finished book was 120,000 words, but I probably wrote about 800,000 words to arrive at that. And so there's a lot of rewriting, a lot of bits that were pulled out and scrapped and done again from scratch, and you need to prepare yourself for that. So put yourself into your writing, but you also need to take a step back and just let other people, deal with it.
So how does that work on the poetry side?
Oh, yeah, I can add something about that. So I'm Vietnamese, Chinese, British. I have a lot of cultural markers in my work that not everybody will understand. I use Vietnamese and Chinese language, and that's one of the things I absolutely won't compromise on. They stay. If an editor or whatever has a problem with that, if they say something like, oh, not everyone will understand, I might agree to have a note at the bottom. I might agree to have translations at the back. That's fine. That's a way around it. And yeah, I'm happy to do that. But yeah, taking it out wholesale wouldn't be something that I would do. And I think when you're thinking about edits like that, just think about who you're writing for. So for me, I was thinking, I'm writing for kids like me, right? I'm writing for kids who have these experiences, have these family histories, and it's important that they see that reflected in my poems if they come to them. So yeah.
So I've got 2 different publishers. I've got Colin at 9 Pens, and Colin just puts the book out as you send it, which is great. And then there's Aaron over at Broken Sleep, and he sent back our manuscript marked up. I mean, granted, it was just taking out the ands and the its and the. But I tell you what, I appreciated it so much, just to have somebody with that distance to just to sharpen the work, to make it more vibrant, was great. So yeah, but other than that, I mean, it's like I've said, it's poetry, it's cheating. There's only 40 lines maximum, really. So what is there to edit? And I think when you're a poet as well, every word is doing something. That's the whole point of poetry. Therefore, editing it is different, because you can't take a paragraph out and go, well, that paragraph, that darling, that is my paragraph, can be removed, because you've already said something in as few words as possible. So hopefully you've said them in the right words.
Thanks. I think that might be, we can take one last very quick question from, I can't see, can you pick somebody?
Thank you, hi. I just wanted to find out, because one of the things that Iqbal was talking about was because I've literally just started, I've just written 2 chapters of something and I've got stuck. Only because of the confidence thing that we talked about earlier, and whether or not it would be accepted by somebody that looks like me to write something that is not about Black people's pain. It's very much, and that's very much, to me, very trendy, but when it's come to something like behavior like love and laughter and all that stuff, I've been sort of, well, it might not, don't know, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really trying to find out about whether or not, because that kind of stuck me, got me stuck, and I think I thought, do I do this? Do I do the stuff that's painful? Because that's going to be accepted? And I think that what you've told us so far, and it may or may not be a question, is that to just stick to what it is that I want to write, because it's about it's not a biography, but it's about life that I know that's other than Top Boy, if that makes sense.
Can I do you know what? Do you
Wait,
know
so
what?
I have to repeat the question.
That's fine.
So, not to summarize too much, but kind of what you're asking about is like the identity trap of, do you have to write directly from your own experience, and also do you have to reflect some of the maybe more negative aspects of that experience, because sometimes it's felt to be kind of expected. So, yeah, please, let's take 2 quick answers, and then we got to call it a day.
If you were a mediocre white cis man, you would not have asked that question. You wouldn't. So just pretend, I know it's gross, but just pretend for half a second that you have some bollocks and you're white, and go, actually, I am amazing. Of course I can do this. And if you do that, always remember that. Remember that mediocre white man who goes, of course I can do that. And go, well, if he can, I'm obviously better than him. I'm going to.
Honestly, I completely concur. You should write about what you want to write about. You don't have to write about you or your story or what you know. If you want to write a story set on a space station, you write a story set on a space station. You're not responsible for representing all black people, or I'm not representing all Asian people or Pakistani people. That's not our job. Our job is to get the story out that we want to write. And my advice to you is bloody pick up that pen, start writing again, finish it off, go back, edit, but keep writing, and do not get blocked because you're thinking that it's not what other people are expecting. It's what you should be expecting.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm afraid we have to call it a day. I'd like to thank our panelists, and we'll see you later.